A man came to see his GP for a routine blood test. He was 56 years old. He exercised 4 times a week. He'd cut out processed food 2 years earlier. He cooked from scratch. He ate vegetables, lean protein, oily fish, nuts, and olive oil. He hadn't touched a ready meal or a fast food restaurant in years. By any reasonable standard, he was eating clean. His total cholesterol came back at 6.8. His LDL was high, his triglycerides were elevated, and his doctor told him he needed to consider a statin. He was stunned. He said the same thing I've heard from dozens of patients in similar situations. But I eat well. How is this possible? And the truth is, his diet wasn't the problem. His diet was probably better than 90% of the population's. The problem was that his cholesterol was being driven by forces that have almost nothing to do with what's on his plate. Forces that his doctor didn't investigate, because the standard approach to cholesterol is still built on a framework from the 1970s that tells us dietary fat is the primary driver. It isn't. And for millions of people who eat well and still see their cholesterol climb, the real drivers are metabolic, hormonal, and inflammatory processes happening inside the body that diet alone cannot fix and that standard cholesterol panels don't explain. In this video, I'm going to show you the 5 hidden reasons your cholesterol is rising even though you eat clean, why the total cholesterol number your doctor gives you is deeply incomplete, and what actually needs to happen to bring those numbers down for good. This is the cholesterol conversation your doctor doesn't have time to have, but you need to hear it. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly 10 years in the AAND, I've seen what happens when cardiovascular risk goes unaddressed. Heart attacks in patients who looked healthy on paper. Strokes in people whose only warning was a cholesterol number nobody properly investigated. What I've learned from a decade on the front line is that cholesterol is one of the most misunderstood markers in medicine. The number itself tells you very little without the metabolic context behind it. My mission now is to help people understand that context so they can make informed decisions and avoid the emergency department entirely. If you're watching this, you're already more invested in your health than most people will ever be. And I want to make you a promise. I promise to keep creating the most helpful science-backed videos I possibly can to help you prevent the diseases I see in the emergency department every single day. All I ask is that you give this channel a chance. Hit the subscribe button and the like button right now. If you get to the end of this video and you didn't learn something new, feel free to unsubscribe. No hard feelings, but if you give me your time and attention, I'll give you everything I've learned from over a decade in medicine. So please subscribe, like, and let's get into this. The first thing you need to understand is something that completely reframes the entire cholesterol conversation. Approximately 80% of the cholesterol in your bloodstream is not from your food. It is manufactured inside your body, primarily by your liver. Your liver produces cholesterol because your body needs it. Cholesterol is an essential structural component of every cell membrane. It's the raw material for vitamin D synthesis. It's required to produce cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, and other steroid hormones. It's essential for bile production, which you need to digest fat. Without cholesterol, you would die. It is not a toxin, it is a vital biological molecule. Your liver adjusts its cholesterol production based on a complex set of internal signals. When you eat more dietary cholesterol, your liver typically produces less. When you eat less, your liver produces more. This compensatory mechanism is why dietary cholesterol, the cholesterol in eggs, shellfish, and other foods, has a surprisingly small effect on blood cholesterol levels for most people. The 2015 dietary guidelines for Americans acknowledged this when they removed the daily cholesterol intake limit, stating that dietary cholesterol was no longer considered a nutrient of concern. So if diet isn't the primary driver of blood cholesterol, what is? The answer is the metabolic and hormonal signals that tell your liver how much cholesterol to produce, how to package it, and how quickly to clear it from the bloodstream. When those signals go wrong, cholesterol rises regardless of what you eat. And those signals are governed by 5 specific processes that most doctors don't have time to investigate. This is the most powerful and most commonly overlooked driver of elevated cholesterol in adults over 45. When your cells become resistant to insulin, your pancreas produces more insulin to compensate. That chronically elevated insulin directly stimulates the liver to increase production of VLDL particles, which are very low-density lipoproteins loaded with triglycerides and cholesterol. These VLDL particles are then released into the bloodstream where they are remodeled into smaller, denser LDL particles. Here's why this matters. Standard cholesterol panels measure LDL cholesterol as a total concentration, but not all LDL particles are equal. Large, buoyant LDL particles are relatively benign. Small, dense LDL particles are the ones that penetrate artery walls, trigger inflammation, and drive atherosclerosis. Insulin resistance specifically increases the production of small, dense LDL, the most dangerous type, while a standard lipid panel reports them as the same number. On top of that, insulin resistance raises triglycerides and lowers HDL cholesterol, creating the characteristic pattern that cardiologists call the atherogenic lipid triad: high triglycerides, low HDL, and increased small dense LDL. This pattern is a far more accurate predictor of cardiovascular risk than total cholesterol alone, and it is driven entirely by metabolic dysfunction, not by dietary fat. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology has demonstrated that insulin resistance is an independent driver of dyslipidemia and cardiovascular risk, even in patients with normal body weight. You don't need to be overweight for this to be happening. You just need to have cells that aren't responding efficiently to insulin. Cholesterol is not just a passenger in the bloodstream, it is an active participant in your body's repair system. When your artery walls sustain damage from chronic inflammation, whether from oxidative stress, high blood sugar, chronic infection, or inflammatory food compounds, your liver increases cholesterol production as part of the repair response. LDL particles are dispatched to the damaged areas to deliver cholesterol for cellular repair. In a short-term, acute scenario, this is a healthy process. The damage gets repaired, the inflammation resolves, and cholesterol levels normalize. But when the inflammation is chronic and ongoing, the repair signal never switches off. The liver keeps producing LDL, the particles keep arriving at already damaged artery walls. They get trapped, oxidized, and consumed by immune cells, forming the fatty plaques that narrow arteries and eventually rupture to cause heart attacks and strokes. Elevated cholesterol in this context is not the cause of the disease, it is a response to it. The cause is the chronic inflammation that triggered the repair response in the first place, and that inflammation can come from ultra-processed food, from chronic insulin elevation, from poor sleep, from gut dysbiosis, from visceral fat, from chronic psychological stress, or from any combination of these. Treating the cholesterol number with a statin without addressing the source of inflammation is like turning off the fire alarm without putting out the fire. This is why high-sensitivity CRP, or hsCRP, is such an important marker. It measures the level of systemic inflammation in the body. If your cholesterol is elevated and your hsCRP is also elevated, it suggests that inflammation is driving at least part of the cholesterol response. Studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine have shown that hsCRP adds significant predictive value for cardiovascular events beyond what traditional lipid panels alone can provide. It tells you whether the fire is burning, not just whether the alarm is ringing. Your thyroid gland sets the metabolic tempo for nearly every process in your body, including the rate at which your liver clears LDL cholesterol from the bloodstream. LDL particles are removed from the blood by receptors on the liver's surface called LDL receptors. Thyroid hormones, particularly T3, the active form, directly regulate the number and activity of these receptors. When thyroid function declines, even to a degree that's classified as subclinical, meaning your TSH is mildly elevated, but your T3 and T4 are technically within the normal range, the number of active LDL receptors on the liver decreases. Fewer receptors means less LDL is cleared from the bloodstream, cholesterol rises, and the patient is told they need a statin when what they actually need is a proper thyroid investigation. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism has shown that subclinical hypothyroidism is associated with elevated total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, and that thyroid hormone replacement in these patients can normalize lipid levels without any dietary change or statin therapy. This is one of the most treatable causes of rising cholesterol, and it is routinely missed because many GPs screen only with TSH and don't request a full thyroid panel, including free T3 and free T4. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, has a direct effect on cholesterol production. When cortisol levels are chronically elevated, whether from psychological stress, sleep deprivation, overtraining, or chronic illness, it stimulates the liver enzyme HMG-CoA reductase, which is the rate-limiting enzyme in cholesterol synthesis. This is the same enzyme that statin drugs inhibit, But instead of blocking it with a drug, chronic stress is doing the opposite, turning it up. Chronically elevated cortisol also promotes visceral fat accumulation, worsens insulin resistance, increases inflammation, and impairs thyroid function. Every single one of these effects independently raises cholesterol through the mechanisms I've already described. Stress is not a minor contributor. It is a metabolic multiplier that amplifies every other driver on this list. This is why people who are under chronic pressure, whether from work, caregiving, financial strain, or health anxiety, often see their cholesterol climb even when their diet is impeccable. Their liver is receiving a hormonal instruction to produce more cholesterol. That instruction is coming from cortisol, not from the food on their plate. Your liver is the factory that produces cholesterol, packages it into lipoproteins, and clears LDL from the bloodstream through its surface receptors. When the liver itself is compromised, whether by non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, chronic inflammation, or metabolic overload, its ability to regulate cholesterol metabolism becomes impaired. In non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the liver produces more VLDL particles as it tries to export the excess fat that's accumulating in its cells. This directly raises both triglycerides and LDL cholesterol in the bloodstream. At the same time, liver inflammation reduces the efficiency of LDL receptor clearance, meaning the cholesterol being produced stays in the blood longer. The result is a cholesterol profile that looks alarmingly high, driven entirely by liver pathology rather than diet. And here's the irony: many patients with fatty liver disease have been eating clean for years. But as I've covered in previous videos, concentrated fructose from juice, smoothies, honey, and agave, along with insulin resistance from refined carbohydrates, can drive fatty liver even in people who avoid obvious junk food. The liver dysfunction raises cholesterol, and the standard blood test gives no indication that the liver is the source of the problem. So here's the picture that emerges when you see all 5 drivers together. For over 50 years, we've been told that cholesterol is primarily a dietary problem. Eat less fat, eat less cholesterol, choose low-fat products, and your numbers will come down. That advice was based on a model that assumed dietary fat was the main input driving blood cholesterol. The science now shows that model was fundamentally incomplete. The liver produces 80% of your blood cholesterol, and the rate of production is governed not by what you eat, but by insulin signaling, inflammatory status, thyroid function, cortisol levels, and liver health. These are the control levers. Dietary fat is, for most people, a minor input that the liver compensates for automatically. This is the cholesterol misdirection. Millions of people have been focused on what's on their plate, while the real drivers, insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, subclinical thyroid dysfunction, chronic stress, and fatty liver disease, have been operating unchecked beneath the surface. They eat clean, they avoid fat, their cholesterol still rises, and they're told the only option is a statin. I'm not saying statins don't work. They do. They inhibit HMG-CoA reductase, reduce cholesterol production, and lower cardiovascular risk. For many patients, they are essential and life-saving, but if the underlying driver is never identified and addressed, the patient stays on medication indefinitely, while the metabolic dysfunction that caused the problem in the first place continues to damage the body through every other pathway it touches. You deserve to know why your cholesterol is high, not just that it is. Now here's what to do with this information. The solution is not to ignore your cholesterol or refuse medication. The solution is to investigate the driver and address it alongside whatever treatment your doctor recommends. A standard lipid panel gives you total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, and triglycerides. That's useful but incomplete. Ask your doctor to add fasting insulin and HOMA-IR to check for insulin resistance. Ask for HSCRP to measure systemic inflammation. Request a full thyroid panel including TSH, free T3, and free T4, not just TSH alone. And if fatty liver is suspected, ask about a fibroscan or abdominal ultrasound. These tests tell you why your cholesterol is elevated, not just that it is, and they're all standard, widely available laboratory tests. If your fasting insulin or HOMA-IR is elevated, insulin resistance is likely your dominant cholesterol driver. The interventions that improve insulin sensitivity, reducing refined carbohydrates, eating whole foods, building muscle through resistance training, walking after meals, and protecting sleep will also improve your lipid profile. Research published in Atherosclerosis has demonstrated that reducing insulin resistance lowers triglycerides, increases HDL, shifts LDL particles from small dense to large buoyant, and reduces overall cardiovascular risk, often without any change in total cholesterol. The total number may not move much, but the quality and danger profile of the particles changes dramatically. If your hs-CRP is elevated, chronic inflammation is contributing to your cholesterol production. The most effective anti-inflammatory interventions are the same ones that address insulin resistance: whole food nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, and stress management. Omega-3 fatty acids from oily fish have also been shown to reduce inflammatory markers and improve lipid profiles. The goal is to reduce the repair signal that's telling your liver to produce cholesterol as a response to vascular damage. If your TSH is above 2.5, even if it's within the standard reference range, it's worth looking at free T3 and free T4 to assess whether subclinical hypothyroidism is contributing. Many endocrinologists consider a TSH above 2.5 with low normal free T3 as evidence of suboptimal thyroid function that could be affecting cholesterol clearance. If thyroid dysfunction is confirmed, appropriate treatment can normalize LDL levels without statins in some patients. If chronic stress is a significant factor in your life, understand that it is directly raising your cholesterol through HMG-CoA reductase activation and through its amplifying effects on insulin resistance, inflammation, and visceral fat storage. Stress management is not a luxury. It is a lipid-lowering intervention. Regular aerobic exercise, consistent sleep, breathing practices, social connection, and deliberate recovery time all lower cortisol and reduce the hormonal drive to produce cholesterol. And one essential note: if you are currently taking a statin or any other cholesterol medication, do not stop or change your dose based on this video. Statins reduce cardiovascular events and save lives. The point of this video is not to argue against medication, it is to argue for investigating the cause alongside taking the medication so that the underlying driver can be addressed and the patient's overall metabolic health improves, not just the number on the test. In the emergency department, I don't see patients with high cholesterol. I see patients with the consequences of what was driving the high cholesterol. The heart attack in the 57-year-old whose insulin resistance was never investigated. The stroke in the woman whose subclinical hypothyroidism went undiagnosed for a decade. The cardiac arrest in the man who had been on a statin for years but whose chronic inflammation, driven by fatty liver and visceral fat, was never addressed. The statin lowered his cholesterol number. It did not fix what was wrong. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. But I've also seen the patients who dug deeper, who asked for the fasting insulin test and discovered they were insulin resistant, who got a full thyroid panel and found subclinical hypothyroidism, who addressed their chronic stress, fixed their sleep, cleaned up the hidden fructose in their diet, and built muscle. Their lipid profiles improved, their triglycerides dropped, their HDL rose, their LDL particle size shifted from small dense to large buoyant, and in some cases, in close consultation with their doctor, their statin dose was reduced. Not because statins are bad, but because the metabolic environment had changed enough that less pharmaceutical intervention was needed. Here's what I want you to carry with you after this video. Cholesterol is not a dietary problem for most people. It is a metabolic signal. When your cholesterol rises, your body is telling you something about the state of your insulin signaling, your inflammatory burden, your thyroid function, your stress load, or your liver health. The number on the blood test is the signal. The driver behind the number is the story. For 50 years, we've been told to read the number and ignore the story. Cut the fat, take the pill, don't ask why. That approach has saved lives through statins, but it has also left millions of people with untreated metabolic dysfunction that continues to damage their body through every pathway other than the one the statin is covering. You deserve the full story, and now you have the framework to ask for it. 5 hidden drivers: insulin resistance, overproducing VLDL and shifting LDL toward the dangerous small dense pattern; chronic inflammation, triggering a repair response that floods the blood with LDL; subclinical hypothyroidism, reducing the liver's ability to clear LDL from the bloodstream; chronic stress and cortisol, directly stimulating the enzyme that produces cholesterol; and fatty liver disease, increasing VLDL output while impairing LDL clearance. All of them metabolic, all of them hormonal, none of them fixed by eating less fat. If your cholesterol is rising despite eating clean, the answer is not to eat cleaner. The answer is to investigate what's telling your liver to produce more cholesterol and to address that driver directly. Ask for the tests, have the conversation with your doctor, and understand that the number is only the beginning of the story. If this video changed how you think about cholesterol, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. Every subscribe and every share helps this channel reach more people who are confused and frustrated by a cholesterol number that doesn't match their effort. And if there's a health topic you'd like me to cover next, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.